How has neurofeedback changed my life is a very difficult question to answer because it radically changed my life personally and professionally. Um, one of the things that happened is I never saw myself or a client after learning about neurofeedback in the same way that I did before then. It changed the lenses that I view people through. So it's profound, the impact that it's had. And it really took over my career. I was doing a variety of things before starting with neurofeedback, and after doing neurofeedback, it became the thing I wanted most to do. I'd been in the mental health field for decades, but really I started doing neurofeedback without any instruction, without any equipment in the 70s when I had an EEG machine at the university where I was. And I started uh, training people to increase their alpha frequencies because alpha was an activity in the EEG that you can easily see with your eyes. And so as I was looking at the EEG and seeing the alpha, I was hooking people up, putting them in a room so they couldn't hear the machine that was printing the EEG, the paper EEG tracings. And when I would see alpha, I would say good into a microphone. And that was their signal. And sure enough, even with that, people learned to increase their alpha, the amount of alpha that they made while they were sitting with their eyes closed. And it was kind of fascinating. But that wasn't really, I wasn't applying that clinically. That was just me seeing if you could increase alpha frequency because alpha had been identified as something you make more of when you're relaxed and aware. So calm focus has calm open focus is what's there, and that's a nice state. So it seemed like a good thing to do, and um, and so I was doing that. But really, I was studying neuropsychology mostly and brain behavior relationships and doing neuropsychological evaluations and psychotherapy. So my day was kind of split up half and half. Uh, that little taste of neurofeedback, though, just kept growing and growing and growing as time went on. It started kind of crowding out the other things because I was seeing things with that I wasn't seeing with the other things I was doing. It became pretty much the consuming overall thing that I did. So I stopped doing the neuropsychological evaluations eventually, starting from the 70s. So when I say eventually, it's like 20 years later. Uh, but stopped doing that, still doing psychotherapy, but primarily using neurofeedback as my vehicle for psychotherapy because it was really adding something to the psychotherapy that wasn't there before. The change that it made to practice, and one of the lenses that came for me, is I had been the director of psychodiagnostic laboratories in academic settings and in hospital settings and places like that of diagnosing people. And so, like in medicine, your diagnosis often defines your treatment. So once you get the diagnosis um, that you have an infection, a strep infection, then there's a medication for that strep infection. And so diagnosis is important in terms of treatment. Learning about neurofeedback and the lens change that came for me is I stopped thinking about diagnosis. Uh, I still classified people, but I classified them in terms of their arousal, over arousal, under arousal, unstable arousal. Th- that was a different thing that really transcended diagnostic categories. And so I stopped spending time trying to come up with the right label for someone's diagnosis and instead thinking how I need to address their arousal and how their arousal is affecting them. So I see everyone. So peak performance people or people with thought disorders. I think about them all the same now. So I'm optimizing brain functioning regardless of what their diagnosis may be. So that was a huge change. The eager community has been not only important to me, it has been important to me because so many people doing mental health work you do it alone in an office with your clients. So it's you and your clients. And uh, we're doing something that's different from what most people are doing. When we're doing neurofeedback, we're interacting with that person in a different way, but you're kind of out there on your own. And that you start getting unsure of yourself or things like that. If you have a community, if you have a community that you're interacting with and sharing with, you feel more confident about what you're doing. When you feel more confident about what you're doing, I think you're more effective about what you're doing, and things are easier. So the community is such an important part of Eager, and thank God it has endured, because I don't know of other communities like that that have built up in other camps or approaches to neurofeedback. The challenges for implementing neurofeedback really weren't intellectual for me. I think coming from the neuropsychology background, already thinking about brain operations and the importance of brain operations, that wasn't the challenge. The challenge was introducing it into the systems that I was in, because it was foreign to most people. It was funny, in a psychiatry setting, they referred to me as the brain guy. And I'm thinking, you're the guys who are supposed to be the brain guys, not me. I'm the psychologist here, you know. So it was really the systems, and that really sort of took over part of my efforts, was introducing neurofeedback into communities and disciplines and settings that it had not been in. So that challenge was the challenge that I still do now when I teach courses and make presentations at facilities and institutions and things like that. So that was my challenge. What I tell people who aren't familiar with neurofeedback, when I'm talking to clinicians who aren't familiar with neurofeedback, is how satisfied are you with your results? And if most clinicians are honest about that, they know they're working really hard, and they see potential in people that they're having trouble drawing out from the person. And the thing I want them to know most is, I had that same experience, and adding neurofeedback made that process easier for the person and for me. So things like emergency calls after hours or on weekends dropped really dramatically. Outcomes with people that you felt you were doing pretty good, if they were showing up for the next appointment, that they lived from the last appointment to the next one, you felt pretty good about that. Actually seeing those people not just treading water and barely keeping their nose above water. Those are the things that were most important, and letting people know that, because it's hard work. It really is hard work. Even with a very motivated client, history, circumstances, genetics, all the things that work against them changing, it's really hard to do that in a brain that doesn't have an effective arousal state or flexibility of arousal. And if you can build that in, if you can build in a better arousal platform to work from, it makes your work so much easier. It makes their work so much easier. Yeah, the barriers to entry are definitely significant. There is a financial cost, there's a time cost in learning, and then there's the implementation and being able to see what works best with whom, how to introduce this to people. There are a lot of challenges, to doing it. I certainly think the results are worth doing that. I appreciate the equipment manufacturers that minimize those things, that provide equipment in an affordable way for people, that provide training for people, provide support for them while they're doing it, because it's too big of a challenge to just buy a piece of equipment. The way I kind of had to do it, it took years. It took years, and you don't want it to take years. You want to be able to use this quicker than that. And so having something built in, not only the community for support, but the community for continuing education and things like that is what's been important. Yeah, an important thing about neurofeedback is you can't dabble in it because the learning curve will be so extended that you'll give up before you get there. You really have to immerse yourself in it. But if the support for that is available to you, it's a lot easier to do. So your learning curve is much quicker. When we look at what's going on in our world, really, not just our society, but actually I think this is worldwide, there is so much evidence of dysregulation in our society. I've been struck. This is a small thing compared to some of the big statistics, but it isn't a small thing in general. I've noticed there have been more athletic events, soccer games, basketball games, different events, that brawls have broken out with fans and players and things like that. Everyone is so on edge. Well, that on edge is reflected in the activity that's going on, and it shows a dysregulation. We've had a pandemic, we've had a contentious political environment for a long time, and not just us in the US. This again is going on worldwide. And we need this at a level now beyond what we've needed it in the past, and we've had trouble kind of meeting the need in the past. And so we need more of this, and we need it available in schools and starting this earlier before it becomes the problem that we're seeing now. So the need has never been greater.